Alright, what's up everyone? It's me again. Today I'm going to be talking about vaccines. I'm coming from a perspective of a raw meat eater, doesn't mess with vegetables, doesn't mess with carbohydrates apart from the occasional fruit and milk, which I still try to limit because, Randall cycle, all that jazz. I'm also someone who's been in a lot of holes, a lot of rabbit holes. I've gone down, I used to have my conspiracy theory days, and I went through the right ones and I still hold a lot of them to be the truth. Stuff about, school as a foundation, its history, all the way to the very fundamentals, which is who is currently in control of the world. I would say I'm a pretty red pill dude, but I still haven't seen a single thing to disprove vaccines, or to make vaccines look bad. And yet I see so many anti-vaxxers. The thing is, when they talk, it's like they're vomiting diarrhea from their mouth, because it's just complete, it's stupidity. It ranges from complete, I was gonna say science denial, but reality denial, right? People who will say, "Oh yeah, I bet it's really great to stab children when they cry." It's like, you are such a moron. You are not utilizing the gift that us humans have over other animals, which is conceptual understandings of things, right? You're not just stabbing nothing into a baby, right? And I'm going to get into more of that specific argument in detail later as well. All the way to people who are actually more scientific, pseudoscientific to be honest, but they'll employ concepts that are much more difficult to understand, that you actually do need to do research in order to debunk properly, and it does get debunked properly. For example, I was having a conversation with someone talking about how, viruses aren't really a thing, or not, it's not that they're not a thing, but they're not really harmful, because the effects that we're observing when we isolate them in vitro through cell culturing is not even comparable to the human organism, right? If a human is completely healthy, they get the best nutrition, they're perfectly well developed, and they have a perfect immune system, can they still get sick? The answer is obviously yes, but for some reason, some people don't buy that. And again, they'll go to the same argument. You can't know what a virus is. You can't identify it. You can't sequence its RNA if it's not isolated via cell culturing in a little petri dish. And I mean, okay, sounds convincing, but I'm going to explain why later. That's still not the case. And everything in between, right? Most of what's in between is just, people talking about how certain metals are toxic, debunked, autism, debunked, and anecdotes, which can all be thrown away to the trash because people don't understand what the hell they're talking about and what the hell they saw in the first place. First off, I'm going to talk about the different levels of science and science denial within the primal community, within primal rhetoric, and then I'm going to get into germ theory versus terrain theory, which I've seen a lot of people talk about terrain theory thanks to Agenus and Godus, and I don't know if there's any other terrain theory proponents out there, but they're probably on the same level of stupid. And then I'm going to get into why vaccines are really not that bad. And when I say not that bad, I mean really great. They're really good. And they are a net positive by an order of magnitude. Okay, so let's get into the levels of science within the primal narrative. Okay, so the first level, which is at the very highest level, is explaining mechanistically why one should appeal to nature. So here's the problem. When I first started, Primal and all this stuff, I was very hesitant because all I would hear is just people appealing to nature as if that did anything. Right? Like Godus. Godus is a freaking idiot. Androgenic will eventually come to find out nature is better and he will pay for all of this unnatural stuff. Right? Who really cares if it appeals to nature if you can become superhuman without the appeal to it, right? Without having to go outside and ground and all this stuff and eating all of these, natural organic things, just like, pop pills and drink powders And with the labels, with all the nutrients and all that stuff, why not just do that? Like, what is wrong with that? If you're like Gotis, which is on the lower levels, you would have just said, because it's nature, we've been doing it for a long time. That's not a good argument. But then comes someone like Face IQ, right? Face IQ, probably the best primal creator out there, apart from his freaking face analysis semantics that I really don't give a crap about. His advice on nutrition, he'll explain things mechanistically. That's why I really like the work that he's doing. It's not like these Instagram people who go out with cutting boards and eat in the sun. Why? Why do you have to do that, right? There's multiple things that are important about the sun. Then why don't you wear sunscreen, right? It's because it's full of carcinogens. But then what if I burn? You burn because of the linoleic acid in the oil and the double bonded unsaturated fats that you're getting from seed oils. That's why you burn. That's why your skin is horrible and you have to apply a bunch of shiny stuff on your face and then call it skincare. When all you need to do is just eat right, and then you'll never have to put Nivea cream on your face again. By the way, I stopped completely because of the saturated fats that I've replaced unsaturated fats with. It's no more UV damage from any of that. When you go into things mechanistically and then do an inference, right, an educated inference, that's how you do science, right? It's the science that gets to the level that actually can debunk the standard dogma around nutrition. You'll get the chuds walking in and saying,
red meat is actually associated with colon cancer.
It's like, yeah, those are associative studies. That's not real science. You can't make a causal inference from that. I know that this is frosty rhetoric, right? Frosty scripts, but it's regardless stuff that you cannot debunk, right? It's stuff that is absolutely true. Why are we looking at associative studies about meat and colon cancer when the people who check, yes, I've been eating meat, are people that are eating a crap ton of acrylamides, a bunch of oxidized hydroperoxide fatty acids from McDonald's, Little Caesars Pizza, KFC, I don't know, some people even make fried chicken in their own house. It's disgusting. People eating burgers with French fries, which is probably the worst food that you can have, are the ones ticking those boxes. And then we're saying it's the meat. It's the red meat that causes cancer. That's why the Inuits all died of colon cancer. And the Maasai, they must have a crap ton of colon cancer because the actual people that we can verify the most that actually have a long-term meat-based diet don't exhibit any of that, and they have incredibly healthy gut microbiomes. It's like, when does dietary dogma decide when to employ an argument and when not to? Associative studies are laughable. Get out of my face with that stuff. It can immediately be chucked in the garbage. Meanwhile, all of the short-term mechanisms that eventually pile up, it's like, yeah, there's pretty much, you don't cook meat, and where are the toxins, right? I mean, I'm sure there's the advanced glycation end products that happen regardless of whatever you're eating, but metabolic regulation. Sure, T3 drops, but I wonder why when you don't have your Randall cycle up-regulated 24/7 from eating carbohydrates, freaking competing with fats for oxidation. This is the level of raw primal rhetoric that I like, right? It's the scientific stuff. It's the stuff that actually has a place within a scientific discussion. So that's going to be the first level. That's going to be the true nutrition mindset. And we have I've seen these other people on social media, and this is the next step, right? It's much more appeal to nature with a side bit of scientific explanation, right, with mechanisms and real studies. But the problem is a lot of these people start to seep in some anecdotes, right? So for example, they'll say Ghislaine Maxwell's father owned a scientific journal. All of science is wrong then? Or it goes to show how corrupt science can be. It's like, first off, was there anything wrong inside of the scientific journal? Or was it just him paying off scientists to do studies to paint whatever it is that he was trying to do in a better light? And the next thing is, it was one journal. How many scientific journals exist in this godforsaken planet? With the millions upon millions of scientists in the world, not just the United States, but across the entire world, you're telling me people that have studied this their entire life aren't going to see something wrong? No, right? They're all being paid $7,000 by their local rabbis, right? They're getting a pat on the back saying, good goy. That's not how things work. Otherwise, every single one of your favorite Primal creators would have been shot down. Just like a Jonas. Even though a Jonas didn't do shit. And not to mention, if they really wanted to keep people from knowing the quote-unquote truth about, the stuff that a Jonas preached, why didn't they scrap all of his work? Why is literally every single Q&A he's ever done on his website? It's genuinely stupid. People die in random ways. How is that hard to understand? Or maybe like Frank Tufano, he's being targeted by the CIA or whatever. No, nobody asked the dude to go get his freaking infraorbital implants. Literally no one in the Primal community has been targeted by the CIA or whatever the hell. Just drop this act. Liver King would have been shut down. Godus would have been shut down. And right now all of these neo-primal LARPers would have been shut down, right? Because it's so easy. So it's like this mix of, science, modern science is wrong. Well, yes it is, right? But not because there's some secret cabal that's controlling all of it. That goes in later, right? Big Pharma doesn't control the universe, but there are financial incentives that are 100% against the human diet. They don't care if, someone who wants to be healthy is being healthy. Guess what? The majority of the populace is going to be eating grain sludge and McDonald's and Wendy's and Popeye chicken, right? Or Little Caesar's pizza. They're going to be, like, what they care about is the majority of people. And the people that are primal, they still live in a house, they still pay taxes, they're still on the internet, they're still getting bombarded mentally, subconsciously, with all the content that's being shown on social media. They don't care, right? So it's like, this next level is like the level of people who understand things mechanistically to a good degree, and then they'll mix in these like conspiracy theories that are very misinterpreted, heavily misinterpreted, and it's just it's a shame. But okay, these people aren't so bad. But then we have the people that like completely ignore the majority of science, right? And that's when we go into terrain theory, and the only science that makes sense to them is the science that they want, right? This is where it gets to that level that's, I'd say these guys are the easiest to debunk, because they're really stupid, and yet they will still operate within reality and give a crap to somewhat argue in good faith, right? To the point where you can destroy them. So for example, you have the average terrain theorists, right? Viruses aren't real. What's really going on is lead poisoning. The reason why viruses aren't real is because this just comes from a shadowy organization. Pharmacology, virology, all of these people, you have to put your trust in the man with the white coat in order to know viruses are real. It's like, who did you trust to know that lead poisoning was real? You know atoms are smaller than viruses, right? Where are you getting these facts, right? And why are you negating all the other ones despite the heavy research, the heavy evidence that we have against them? That's why it's so easy to debunk these people. You can dunk on them like this, because it's, and this is the type of people that, for example, the type of people that are like agenous, right? Cauterize minerals. What does that mean? Right? You'll have, I think that this is equivalent to someone who is like a young earth creationist, or maybe a flat earther, although flat earthers are definitely a lot worse. But it's that level of their ability to logically think about things is heavily flawed. They don't see how many fallacies are within their arguments. So these people are definitely the easiest to debunk, and we're gonna go through some of those examples. Oh, I'm gonna make it. Actually, let's do a tier list of anti-vax arguments. Then we have the final phase, right? The F tier of science, and these are the people that are a lot of, like Godus, pretty much, right? Complete denial of what we've observed in reality, right? We can't see atoms because they don't interact with photons or whatever. But it doesn't mean we can't detect them. We can't see viruses with microscopes because they're too small. Doesn't mean we can't detect them, right? Doesn't mean that there's other ways that we can see things. A lot of people are aware that, like, there's this mystic side of life, and they'll go the complete opposite way. They'll say, we only can see 0.0035% of the light spectrum, and that's true, and that's very interesting. But I feel like if I told that to Godus, they would just say, who told you that? This is a religious belief. It's like, we can... Okay, Isaac Newton, he grabs the pyramid of glass and he puts light through it, and it makes a rainbow. And he realizes that at the end of that rainbow spectrum, there's still a difference in heat compared to the rest of the room. That's infrared and ultraviolet light that we can't detect physically with our senses, but we can detect it. Because even though we're apes, we're not brainless, and we have the gift of contextual reasoning. That's what these Neanderthals still haven't evolved to do. So it's a bunch of things. These people are like on the level of flat earthers. And a lot of these people are unironically flat earthers. That's not a joke. Like, some of these people are unironically people who believe there is a firmament. Because they want to live in a delusional land. They've watched The Matrix and they want to be Neo, going against the government, going against all the, psyops. And they want to feel like the story is actually bigger than it really is. Like Godus. Just think of Godus, right? There's no such thing as mitochondria. There's no such thing as atoms or molecules. So, yeah, it's absolutely ridiculous what some of these, the lengths that some of these people will go through within the primal rhetoric. And yeah, because of that, I'm definitely very disappointed when I go in and I try to have discussions about, diet, health, nutrition, and a lot of it will be skewed. Complete denial of the scientific method. I feel like at the very top, it's people that utilize the scientific method, then it's people that utilize the scientific method and anecdotes, then it's people who utilize anecdotes and try using the scientific method, but they just suck at it. And at the very bottom, it's just denial of scientific method completely, right? So, yeah, now let's get into terrain theory versus germ theory. Okay, now terrain theory versus germ theory. So I'm just gonna give you guys the gist of it. Germ theory is the current widely accepted one, and it's that there exists microbes. Those microbes can either be helpful, beneficial, or they can be harmful because they feed off of you. They rely on you, and they don't do it in a symbiotic way. They do it in a parasitic way, right? A lot of primal people think that parasites are important, but by definition, a parasite is not something that you want to have. Look up and search up the definition of a parasite. If you want to make claims that certain microbes are wrongfully classified as parasites instead of symbiotes, then go ahead, do it, whatever. But yeah, for example, tuberculosis, that is a parasitic microbe that gets in your system and it feeds off of you. The same way that if I grew a fungus on my left arm and it started feeding off of it and it started giving me nerve damage, the same, obviously not the exact same way, but it's the same concept. It's feeding off of your organism, but harming it at the same time. A lot of people say, that's ridiculous, because why would an organism kill its host, right? Why would an organism that needs to survive? Because they spread, you freaking morons. A singular microbe dies in like 2 days. But the entire disease, the entire group of microbes that would be within your system if you were sick, they don't really care about their own survival because they're dying either ways, right? So the way that they survive is, even though they're all gonna die eventually, right? Whether if it's because you get rid of them or because you die yourself and they have nothing else to feed on, they still replicate because there's other people. People, animals, right? The world is huge. There's a lot of stuff. Terrain theory, what it suggests is that there's no such thing as a parasitic microbe, even though that's like they don't have a reason. Like, why wouldn't there be a parasitic microbe? Does that mean that predators don't exist? If I kill an animal, I'm killing it, and eventually I'm not going to have any more of it. When I eat it, there's going to be another one. Just like if I was a group of parasitic microbes, I'm going to end up being done with this, whatever this organism is that I'm on. There's going to be another host. There's going to be another victim. So why wouldn't there be parasitic microbes? No clue. But they say that there isn't, that there are none. And what really goes on is that your body produces good microbes, right? Not necessarily that you produce any. It's more like you are host to many. Yeah, you are host to many good symbiotic microbes. The problems arise when the internal imbalance of whatever substances, right? The environment of your body starts to degrade, whatever in whatever ways that might be, whether you're not eating properly, whether you are in the presence of like bad air, pollution, whether you're not sleeping properly, like all of these things, stress, they eventually contribute to the degradation of the environment of your body. And then any helpful, right, previously helpful microbes are going to now start feeding off of dead cells, which would be your own cells. So a couple problems with this. If you had dead cells that microbes would start to feed off of, the problem still wouldn't be the microbes, because you would just have dead fucking cells. That would be the first thing. The second thing is, we don't deny the fact that there exists problems off of things that aren't microbes, right? You can cut yourself and cells will die. You can get lead poisoning and cells will die. Who are you trusting on the fact that lead can lead to poisoning, though? If microbes aren't a viable option, then why are atoms or molecules? Now, the thing is, we can observe microbes. We can culture them, isolate them. They are a thing within nature. I'm going to go into some complex arguments that I saw months back, which were about not the fact that they don't exist, but the fact that the only way that we can sequence them is if we isolate them and do it within cell cultures and not the actual context of a human organism and system. But even then, it's still flawed. I'm going to go into that later. We have extensive evidence. You can even do it yourself. Go spend $200 on a good quality microscope. Go to your local pond. Take some of that water. Put it under the put it under the thing, and you will see tiny little germs moving around. A lot of people also reference Louis Pasteur because of his unethical practices. And also, they'll just make shit up about him that's like, completely founded on absolutely nothing, just rumors and myths that aren't true. Like the fact that he said that the truth is that terrain is the key. It's like, no, he never said that. He just wanted to keep his work secret. That doesn't really prove anything. It's like when evolution deniers say or reference Charles Darwin. If Charles Darwin existed today, he wouldn't know fuck all about what would be going on in evolution, in a class about evolution, genetics, genes, all that stuff. He wouldn't have a singular clue. The same way that Louis Pasteur wouldn't know shit about what we study in modern virology. These are not the people that you want to reference. Just because Louis Pasteur was the first person to look into this stuff, right? Peep through a microscope, it doesn't mean that he is the state-of-the-art reference point to all of virology. No one cares about this dude. We have centuries of actual science on this stuff now. The fact that we can isolate these pathogens and observe them via electron microscopes, which I'm going to go into later, because I know there's a lot of people that say, oh, you have to preserve them and then you're going to damage them when you preserve it. Stupidest argument in my life. You just take 2 freaking seconds to move your fingers and do a little Google search and use your brain. Yeah, we can observe them. How do we observe the effects? How do we observe the effects of them? Yes, the gold standard would usually be mechanistically observing the effects in a cell culture. But even then, there have been, and there does exist, methods of, sequencing RNA from scratch before even knowing what the virus is in human patient samples through what these people are experiencing. Then they get confirmed later on to be the cause of all the symptoms. All right, we're gonna get into that later. The point is, you observe germs, you observe both bacteria, which are fully fledged prokaryotic cells, and viruses, which are a bit harder to get into because they're not technically alive. They have DNA and they replicate, they reproduce, but they don't have all the other things that life requires. They still need a host. They still replicate. Again, some of them are good. Some of them are actually being used to treat bacterial diseases, right? Phages, right? Phage therapy. Because they target things, unlike antibiotics. They just nuke your entire gut microbiome. And yeah, but you wouldn't put rabies in your system to combat tuberculosis, right? That wouldn't be the phage therapy. That would just be killing someone. So we're gonna get into that later. Maybe if I have enough time, I'll look at a study that Jonas did about rabies, because it's the funniest thing ever. It's absolutely hilarious. But we might have to. It's just, I don't think that'll fit into this video because that's more specialized. But I definitely want to do that. I'm gonna make a video on that specific study another day. But yeah, that's terrain theory versus germ theory. Okay, so vaccines. Before we get into vaccines, we have to understand that we have an immune system. We have a system dedicated to fighting off external forces of nature. It's not the same as your detoxing system, right, which involves the liver. This is throughout your entire body. It's in your blood, and it fights off pathogens, because we have that ability, because it's what was naturally advantageous for us to develop. So the immune system largely works on training itself. So we have something known as memory cells, which create antibodies that specifically target the microbes that we were talking about, right? Which include viruses and bacteria. Now here's the thing. In order to create those memory cells that produce the proper antibodies, we have to have already combated the disease, and a lot of the time that's not possible because there is a risk of death. People even used to do this in the old days, right? Back when smallpox was a thing, when they didn't have vaccines yet, they would do this thing called virilation, where they would get dried smallpox scabs and they would just snort it up their nose, and it still had a very high mortality rate. It lowered it slightly, but it was pretty much just the freaking smallpox virus, right? They were still going to get extremely sick, and it had a high death rate, much more than anything that vaccines could have nowadays. So the main thing that's important to take away is how the immune system works. I'm just giving a really general overview, right? If there's any objections, pause the video and write them down. After that, vaccines are just a reduced version of that virus that will create, or it will signal a response from your body to create those memory cells and antibodies that perfectly would combat the real disease, right? So some of the vaccines are just worn down, crappier versions of the virus that can't do shit, and some of the other ones are protein-based vaccines, which is like the one from COVID, that has only proteins that signal a response that create these antibodies, right? So that's the gist of it. If there's any objections already, I'd love to know, because the only things that I've heard bad about vaccines from, I would say, like the third level, are the contents of its adjuvants and preservatives. It's really the preservatives, but people call it the adjuvants for some reason. People think thimerosal was an adjuvant when it was not. So that's the first thing about vaccines. Now, how do we know that all of this has a place in the real world? Well, we've been doing this for hundreds of thousands. We've been doing this for hundreds of years. In the past 50, child mortality rate has gone down 40%. That's not a small number. That is astronomical. Smallpox completely eradicated. Polio almost completely eradicated. Measles almost completely eradicated. No thanks to, right now, RFK Jr. fear-mongering the MMR vaccine, like 38 or 32 kids dying in Samoa, right? Due to measles. Autopsies are done. Not like the ones that Agonist does, or like the ones that he did with rabies where he didn't preserve the body. Real autopsies are done, and you can identify what was in these bodies. But now, what about the risks, right? Are you, like, you're injecting stuff into your body? What am I putting into my body, right? I'm injecting a substance. What is it? About the safety. First off, it's very important to understand that, first off, vaccines are heavily trialed, like extensively, through years upon years upon years. That's why a lot of people had problems with the COVID vaccine. It's that it was given out way too soon. But most vaccines are trialed for multiple years, testing if there's any side effects before they're put on the market. However, even then, there can still be problems. Like the polio vaccine, for example, there were cases of when they gave out polio vaccines with the virus not being reduced enough. And it was really bad, because those ones that were given out, it was essentially just like injecting people with the polio virus. These people died, right? I think, or either they died or they had really, really bad consequences. Those are some risks, yes, absolutely. Guess what? They were 1 in 100,000, and most of the risks that you'll see, some of the side effects or allergies, will be also 1 in 100,000 at most. So to say, first off, like Alex Jones going up to like Anthony Fauci, did he go up to Anthony Fauci, or was it someone else in the airport saying 20 million of people dead from those vaccines, huh? How retarded can you be? Like, where are these numbers coming from? Who said ever that there were 20 million people dead from vaccines? To ignore the amount of to ignore the child mortality rate that I mentioned earlier, completely, like, why would you do that? Our diets are literally worse now. How come we live longer and children live longer, or they live enough to become adults? That's what's really just not sitting well with me. And then we have the entire, like, autism and Alzheimer's thing. There is no correlation whatsoever. If you want to talk about the toxic substances, okay, we'll get into the autism later, because it really raises my cortisol. But I want to leave it till the end when I can do a tier list. But okay, what about the issues with some of the preservatives? I mean, I meant to do like this with the adjuvants. In reality, they're the preservatives that a lot of people have a problem with. What about the thimerosal, the aluminum, the formaldehyde? Formaldehyde and aluminum, they are given in such small quantities. There are more of those in apples and breast milk. You're gonna deny a kid breast milk because of the aluminum content? You have to understand that dosage is absolutely very important. And then when we go to the whole thimerosal thing, thimerosal wasn't even proven to be harmful in the first place, especially at the quantity that was given. Like, just because there's a mercury atom, people think mercury. Oh shit, Mercury. Marie Curie. She burned her hands using mercury. It's like, that's not the same context of thimerosal. Thimerosal has the mercury atom in it. It changes the context completely. Take, for example, sodium chloride. Take sodium, take a tiny bite, take a chunk the size of a salt particle, put it in your slide it down your gullet, and you will catch fire. Like, it will incinerate in your mouth before it can even get down to your stomach. 'Cause it reacts with water really potently and it explodes. Take chlorine, right? It is a gas that was literally used during warfare to gas people. It wasn't the Jews, but it was used during warfare. I can't remember exactly where, but it was a deadly gas that if you inhaled, you would die. Put both of them together, you get fucking table salt. The context of the atom within the molecule is absolutely very important. And even then, since the public fervor was so strong against the thimerosal preservative, they took it off the market in 2001. So, anyone talking about thimerosal, they can just go ahead and, like, don't even talk about thimerosal in this in anything that has to do with this video. It's been so heavily debunked. So risks, there exist risks, as there exist risks with anything. There exist risks eating raw meat, okay? And I do that every single day because it's delicious and it's the most nutritious, but it still carries risk. There's a risk if you go out and walk in the middle of the street. There's a risk you're gonna get, like, there's a risk a train will collide with you on the way to work tomorrow. Like, there's risks for everything. But I don't understand what the obsession is with the vaccine risks, right? Yes, some people can have reactions. Some people are allergic to apples. Like, the amount of risks are so small, they are negligible, and any vaccines that might have high risks are heavily trialed. There was a version of the COVID vaccine that had problems. I can't remember exactly which one. I'll look it up. Wait. Yeah, okay, it was the Moderna vaccine that caused myocarditis. Immediately, it was taken off the market. This is like, they're not just pumping you up with poison, and if they are, explain what it is, for crying out loud. Oh my god. When will I ever see a proper vaccine debunking? It's ridiculous. So, okay, the way that people should be thinking about this is, first off, what is a mechanism, right? Can you then make an educated inference from it? Yes. Okay. Then, what are the outcomes of it, right? What are the controlled studies, right, with proper controlled variables, binary causal studies that show outcomes? Do we have any of them? Yes, we do. Okay, next, is this the main consensus, or is it just a singular study? Because I might get some studies, but most of the studies that I've sort of seen, they're to do with animals, including the one that Adrianus did on rabies. Is it the main consensus, or is it just a singular study? That's another thing. And finally, does it all make sense together? Again, terrain theorists. How come you will call someone a white coded doctor, part of, like, owned by a huge pharma corporation? because you were talking about viruses. But then when you talk about environmental damages, then it's alright. Guess what? The environment is made of molecules. And those molecules that you say are poisonous and toxic, they come from the same establishment. Okay, so let's start to go through all of these different arguments. First one is first. I'm gonna start off with the easiest one. Imagine stabbing a baby, seeing it cry, and thinking that's healthy. So a lot of people think that, the senses are the more important part of you, right? If something pains you, then you shouldn't, do it. It's like, okay, yeah, you shouldn't cut yourself. You shouldn't eat vegetables when they taste bad. You shouldn't eat shit when it tastes bad. But sometimes it's freaking necessary. Think about, and I'm going to use this word properly, think about cauterization. You get a wound, you have to apply heat around it to prevent the loss of liquids and bodily fluids. What, is that wrong now? Would you rather just bleed out to death? Obviously not. If you get a cut and instead of getting stitches, you just let it bleed out, is it going to recover properly or not? Right? So just the fact alone that you're stabbing someone is not it, dude. It's not it. If this was to save somebody's life with, somebody got bit by a dog, for example, and they had to get the rabies shot, you obviously don't believe in it because you read the Jonas study and you think that's somehow in any way, shape, or form valid, even though it's the most laughable study I've ever read in my entire life. Then yeah, this might be a proper, this might be a good argument for you, but it is so dumb. Debunk stitching, debunk cauterizing, and debunk every single thing that has to do with, causing pain to yourself, but for a net positive in the long run. Debunk all of that, and then I'll give you this stupid below the fucking sewers level argument. This goes 100% in Neanderthal level. We're gonna put it here. Yeah, it's where it belongs. Next up, heavy metals cause autism. There is literally no correlation with vaccines and autism. Autism is a neurological structure. A lot of people will say, okay, then how come autism has gone up in the years that vaccines have come out? It's like there are different ways for us to diagnose and spot autism. Back in the days, in order for you to be considered autistic, you had to flap your arms around and act autistic. And nowadays, we know a lot of people are simply, neurodivergent. They're on the spectrum, but they can function completely fine within society. A lot of people who are neurodivergent, on top of everything, excel even further in whatever it is that they're trying to do in life. Think of, for example, Magnus Carlsen, all the famous chess players. Extremely smart. They can function within society, and yet they are neurodivergent because there are ways for us to diagnose it more properly. It's like if I said, in order to be considered tall, you have to be 7 feet tall. Okay, now, a couple years later, in order to be considered tall, you have to be 6 feet tall. Whoa, look how tall people have gotten. That's essentially what you guys are saying with the whole autism thing. Now, how a heavy metal can somehow change your entire cerebral structure, something that is 100% genetic, no clue at all, right? Then you'll reference things like, what are they called again? Then you'll reference things like the Amish people, right? Amish people don't have autism, except, yes, they fucking do. There are cases of people with autism and are Amish. Those cases are reported. And guess what? They also get vaccines. So, they probably get the autism from the vaccines, right? No, it just goes to show that the argument that they employ is, it's founded on absolutely nothing again. So this one I'm gonna put in sheep of the other herd. The autism thing is completely out of sorts. But what it could be indicating is your brain's capacity to, manage aluminum stores. Not 100% sure on that, but just the fact that of the of the dosage alone, it's enough to put this in a sheep of the other herd. This is yeah, preservatives and aluminum is just it's not enough. You know, you also you go the majority of the vaccines that you take in life are at an extremely early age. You're telling me you go your entire life without the effects of Alzheimer's until you're very, very old, and then you get the Alzheimer's. Yeah, just I think this is much more to do with diet, right? That's my own personal theory right there. And when I mean theory, I mean like hypothesis. Yeah, this is just I don't know. The aluminum, like if you're saying that the cause of Alzheimer's is aluminum, then yeah, it's absolutely sheep of the other herd mentality there. But huh, it is interesting because Alzheimer's has gone up throughout the past couple of years. It's just, you know, association does not equal causation, right? So because of that, I'm absolutely going to put this in sheep of the other herd. All right, next up we've got the electron microscopy isn't valid argument. So basically, in order to be observed by an electron microscope, you need to preserve or yeah, find ways to have whatever it is that you're looking at basically be preserved. And you can do this either like using different chemicals, or you can do certain process to the microbes, right? And the reason why is because an electron microscope doesn't look at things through light, it scans them using radiation. So if they're not preserved, if they're not in like the intact version, they'll just get destroyed because it's like very soft, very fragile molecular structures, right? It's their cells. And the thing is, people who pretend to know stuff about science will say that that's not valid because then that means you can't ensure what the molecule or whatever it is that you're looking at structured to be in its original form. And it's like, the reason why that's not a good argument is because we have all types of preservation methods and they all yield the exact same results. We've got stuff like aldehyde fixation, osmium tetroxide post fixation, cryofixation. You have freeze fractures, negative staining, resin embedding, and even just stuff like scanning electron microscopy, which doesn't even like doesn't show you like the insides of everything, still shows you the same morphology from the outer 3D layer. Like, these things all show the exact same results, and yet they're completely different preserving processes. Now the burden of proof shifts back to you guys. How are we getting completely how are we preserving these microbes in the complete different ways and still getting the exact same results? That's the main reason for why this argument isn't good, but it's a good one, and it captures the audience. So I'm gonna put that in nutrition LARPer because it does take a bit more than like the generic, you know, oh, there's heavy metals in vaccines type of stuff. That's why I'm gonna put this in nutrition LARPer. All right, next up is probably one of the arguments that I've struggled with the most because it was one of the ones that I had never seen anyone talk about, but I was still able to manage to, you know, do enough research on it and realize it doesn't really make sense. It's the fact that the only way that we can identify viruses and sequence their genome is via in vitro cell culturing and isolation. The problem with so just to explain why this is a big issue is because if you look at a human being, how do you know what is causing them to have those symptoms, right? If you look at somebody who has I don't know, like bloody diarrhea, let's just say that because that's the example with Ebola. Let's say somebody has bloody diarrhea, they're experiencing all these symptoms. How do we know that this Ebola virus is the one that's causing the problems, right? When we then take the Ebola virus and we put it in these petri dishes and observe what happens to the cells mechanistically, it's like we get the mechanisms, right? And like, okay, the mechanisms in themselves, they're like already quite a lot of evidence to show that those are actually the cause of all the symptoms. But even then, it's like, okay, a human body optimally as well shouldn't be experiencing these things, right? Because they aren't a bunch of cells that have been, used growth factors to like, multiply and whatever in a petri dish, right? The human organism has to be much more complex. There's no way that we can actually make a causal inference here. And that would have been true a long time ago. You could have made that argument. But we have next gen sequencing nowadays. 99, and I'm going to list these studies in the description. 99, but before any study was done with these isolating these viruses, they were sequenced from blood samples directly from patients. This is some stuff that it's a complex argument, but yeah, we were able to sequence directly from the blood sample 99 Ebola genomes just from blood samples. We didn't have to do any cell culturing, any isolations. It's called next gen sequencing. And the dude that I told this to, he said that those were computer made simulations and that they were pretty much bullshit. But that seemed like okay, he didn't explain much of what he meant by that. But even then, afterwards, when you confirm via the gold standard, which is cell culturing, then you realize they both match up, except this time the genome was first sequenced via blood samples. So yeah, and it wasn't just with the Ebola virus. They also did this with the Zika virus. I think it was piss samples, if I'm not mistaken. It was piss samples. And if I'm not mistaken, this is the same case with the SARS-2, the COVID virus. It was also sequenced before any cell culturing. But yeah, there are cases where this can happen. Cell culturing still shows us quite a lot in terms of information, and we can make an educated inference. But now the fact that we have this technology, that next gen sequencing, that allows us to sequence viruses directly from blood samples or patient samples, and then we compare them afterwards with cell culturing, it's enough to make a causal inference. And because of that, I'm going to put this in nutrition LARPer, but it's probably one of the highest ones. I want to put it between true scientific mindset and nutrition LARPer. Because it almost pokes at something that was wrong some time ago, but now, like, this is debunked easily. Alright, next up we have the VAERS database. Now, when people bring up this VAERS database as if it's like a study, right? A lot of people will unironically also say it is a study. I laugh. It's very similar to Billy Carson talking about his Anunnaki and how he graduated from Khan University. And like, you search up Khan University and you get Khan Academy, like a a course that costs $6 to take to help you on your high school classes. It's the same level of exaggeration. This is a self-reporting database. I could go on here and say the COVID vaccine caused the penis to grow on my nipple, right? And it'll just stay on there because this is a database for people to report vaccine injuries, and for if there's enough people reporting high vaccine injuries, there will be an incentive to look into these problems. The problem is that, especially during COVID, people who know what the hell was going on, they would infer things completely out of context. For example, if I got the vaccine and then the next day, I experienced some pain in my arm, that would definitely be cause for concern. But some of these people were saying, I got the vaccine, 3 weeks later I puked a lung out, right? not really, but they were making these claims that just had absolutely nothing to do with vaccines, right? A lot of people were saying that it caused turbo cancer. I remember, which was the fact that it accelerated the rate at which cancer spread. These are random people, right? Some of them unironically will get on there to lie just straight up, but the majority of them are people that observe things because their health is really garbage either ways, but since they got the vaccine a month or 3 weeks ago, then they're going to blame it on the vaccines, which, you know, is definitely caused by a lot of fear-mongering and confirmational bias. This is not a study. Never reference this as a study. This is a database, self-reporting database. Right? Like, again, I could go on to the VAERS database and talk about how, after the COVID vaccine, my pubic hairs randomly got braided. Like, no, this is not a... I'm gonna put this in sheep of the other herd because it's a very sheep-ish interpretation of data. I might even put in the Neanderthal tier, but I'm gonna just call it the sheep of the other herd. Okay, now we have the percentage of getting a vaccine injury. Now the percentage isn't actually this low. It's just this is the only photo I could find on the internet. It is around the percentage of getting a vaccine or having an allergic reaction to vaccines, according to the NIH. But all right, if we take a COVID vaccine, mRNA vaccines into consideration with the myocarditis, then it would drop down to 0.00001% instead of 0.0000001%. So still pretty low. That's 1 in 100,000. So I would say that this is definitely part of the true scientific mindset because it's the fact that these are things that can actually happen. But to increase or inflate the severity of it and act like it trumps all of the incredible stuff that vaccines have done, the eradication of multiple different diseases and pathogens in human society, the fact that child mortality rate has increased, like by a long shot, has dropped. It's just I'm gonna put this in nutrition LARPer, even though it's true, because of how inflated the severity of this is made out to be. If you were to tell someone, or if you were to tell me to stop vaccines because of this, it's just pathetic. It's a pathetic attempt. Alright, and now I think this is the last thing that I'm going to get into, and it's the financial incentive. Big Pharma owns the universe, and they're pumping these out to make money, right? I'm thinking of some people that will just, say, no, that's not the reason why. They're spending money on this to keep you weak and docile. But, all of that has been debunked either ways. The problem is there's also people who believe that the reason why vaccines are given out is because, we can just do alternative therapies in medicine and cure all disease naturally, and instead of having to give the government and big pharma our money. In reality, if vaccines are, again, I'm against taking antibiotics, for example, right? I had to take antibiotics once, and I'm not really proud of it. I got like really bad parasites. Parasites, not symbiotic microbes. I got bad parasites, and I had to take antibiotics in order to kill them. And I ended up, on top of that, killing all the good bacteria in my gut microbiome. The doctor gave me some freaking microbes that I would just drink, some probiotics, but don't really know what was in those vials. They said they were probiotics, but in reality, I think you can pretty much just get that eating raw meat and yogurt, kefir, all that good stuff. Antibiotics are sort of they're not entirely a band-aid medicine, but for example, painkillers are absolutely band-aid solutions to diseases, right? If you take paracetamol, just know there's something wrong with your health. You're just taking something to like shield you, or like put fingers in your ears for you to ignore the fact there's something wrong with your body, right? There are these bandage solutions that big pharma does heavily profit off of. It's just vaccines is the thing that they profit the absolute fucking least out of. They are, like, think about this, they are preventing for years and decades disease that could otherwise be treated with bandage solutions, right? If I got Ebola, and instead of getting a vaccine for it, the doctors instead prescribed me a medicine that would continue to keep me with Ebola, and just prevent me from dying from it, so I could take it and buy it every single week. Then it's like, okay, that's a band-aid solution. That's a heavy that's a lot of money coming into to big pharma. What is a band-aid solution, or not even a band-aid solution? It was literally a fucking scam. What was an absolute scam was ivermectin, the solution to COVID that was being pushed by frauding shills like forgot their names. But yeah, horse medicine being used as a treatment for COVID, that's a band-aid solution. Actually, no, it's a scam, but that's a heavy profit for whoever was selling those. Contrary to vaccines. Vaccines are probably the least profitable thing in all of pharmacology, right? So, yeah, because of that, I'm going to put this in sheep of the other herd. It's a stupid argument. Okay, this sounds like I'm being really biased, because there's no true scientific mindset. But there's some of these things that, for example, the chance of having a vaccine injury, that's founded within real science. It's just there's no scientific argument to go against and eliminate vaccines, right? Which is what RFK Jr. has been doing to the NIH, right? It's been cutting all vaccine development research funding, and it's really sad because there was an HIV vaccine that was being researched that looked very promising, but he doesn't even believe HIV exists in the first place. It's, oh my god, my cortisol is raising again. Yeah, there's no good reason to propone terrain theory, and even more beyond that, to take away vaccines from our lives. The majority of people that I've seen who are anti-vaxxers will repeat some of these sheep of the other herd claims, right? Because they aren't heavily researched about vaccines, but still want to have an opinion on them. But then there's the grifters who will sell ivermectin or sell other naturalistic alternative therapies to all the diseases in the world. In the end, it doesn't matter how healthy you are, a bear can still come and from behind and rip you into pieces. The same way a pathogen can come into your system and mess with it, deteriorate you. Like, yeah, don't expose yourself to HIV being gay. That was a joke. Don't expose yourself to any disease, right? Make sure that you're sourcing your raw meat properly. Make sure you're not eating high meat and that's doesn't have rigid fermenting protocols. Make sure that you are careful with that stuff, right? Make sure you wash your fucking hands when you handle stuff, right? Don't wipe your ass and then go eat a couple minutes later without getting rid of the germs that are in your hands. But they're invisible. If you're on that level of reality denial, then that's like this video isn't gonna do shit. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I think that's gonna be the end of the video. I'm curious to see what people say about this, and I've got some ideas for the jaundice study video that I'm gonna be making soon. So yeah, Thank you all, and see you guys later.